Tattoo artists, what absolute scum have you had to deal with on the job? I spent the better part of the workday freehanding and outlining a dragon back piece on a woman in her early 20s. She had several pieces on her back that she had received from a kitchen wizard that we were covering as well, so that raised the difficulty a couple of notches. Her boyfriend and best friend hung out, chatted, and watched movies all evening while we worked. All in all, not a bad time. Until it was time to pay. As we finished up and put the bandage on, she turned to me and said, "Okay, so I get paid next Tuesday. Is it okay if I come back and pay you then?" I laughed because obviously she was joking, right? She had to be joking. She had better be joking. When I realized she wasn't, I said, "No, that's not how this works. Someone is going to have to pay before you leave." She turned to her boyfriend and asked, "You got this, right?" He laughed and said, "You know damn well I don't have any money." She looked to her best friend, who conveniently found something interesting on the ceiling, so she was no help either. The client then turned to me, puffed up a bit, trying to look more serious than I did, and asked, "Well, what are you going to do if we just leave? You can't keep us here." I figured this was going to be our next course of action, and she was right, I couldn't detain them. It gets into a grey area near the border of kidnapping and not something that I wanted to chance. But what I did do was point out to her that I had her release form with all her information and a photocopy of her ID. I let her know the second they walk out the door, I'd contact the police and report them for theft of services. Thinking it over for a few minutes, they sat back down and she started making phone calls, trying to scrape together the cash to avoid police involvement. About an hour later, a half hour past closing, a guy shows up with a fistful of bills for me, and that's when all hell breaks loose. Her last-ditch effort, it seems, was to call the guy she was cheating on her boyfriend with. The guy throws the money on the counter and starts a screaming match with the client and the boyfriend, while the best friend just stands there yelling at everyone. Their use of adjectives was impressive. Somehow I managed to wrangle the herd of cats out the door so I can lock up the shop. By the time I got everything closed down, the screaming match had turned into a fistfight in the parking lot, and someone at the fast food joint a few doors down had called the cops anyway. Shop locked up, money in hand, I noped the frick out and let the cops do their job. Thankfully, I never saw any of them again. That was a wild swing and a miss from that tattoo recipient. I don't know what her intended outcome was there or what she expected, but I guess from her perspective, at least one or both of the guys she was dating were locked up and not her. This isn't even my worst one, but it's just one that sticks with me. In 1995, my client had decided to not be alive anymore. In the grieving process, his 3 surviving sisters wanted to get tattooed by me to help connect with their brother who had passed away. It was a weird day, not because of the requests or the fact that I was doing memorial tattoos, but because you could feel the tension between the family. My client's death had prematurely brought these siblings together, and somehow, spending the afternoon together in a tattoo shop, they'd started to forgive each other, and their underlying resentments had started to wash away. It was really great to watch these adult children bond again. So lastly, I tattooed a new boyfriend for one of the sisters. He wasn't getting a memorial tattoo, he was getting a bullhead. This was the first time he'd met the extended family. While I tattooed the boyfriend, the girls returned from shopping at a head shop next door. They were showing off some shirts they bought while the boyfriend was in the chair. He saw a Nirvana shirt that the girls had just purchased and said, "Hey, he blew his head off too." And I sat for 39 more minutes in complete discomfort. I love when this question comes up. I managed a shop and occasionally we'd get Nazis and juggalos. At a friend's shop, whenever Nazis would come in asking for swastikas, he'd tell them $3,000 for your chest, but $50 for your hands or face, and it had to be done by the guy who was from the Philippines who tattooed at their shop. Not an artist, but I spent a lot of time in shops. This one girl who came in to get an outline for this absolutely massive back piece, with wings or some stuff, the artist who's doing the piece keeps telling us how hot she is and how excited he is to do it. She comes in and she is gorgeous. She takes her shirt completely off and unhooks her bra. The artist shoots us all this creeper grin. Then he starts the first line. The girl starts full-on screaming. I've never heard anything like it. Just a continuous scream the entire time the needle is touching her skin. Then every 10 seconds she'd decide that she had had enough, without warning, and she'd try to wriggle away. Each time the guy would almost screw up his line and freak out. Cut to her crying and half undressed on the ground, with the artist screaming at her about how he's never going to be able to finish, and if she doesn't stop, he's kicking her out. He had barely finished a single feather. The girl promises to be better and lays down. The guy starts the tattoo thing again and is about to start when she lets out another scream. He hasn't even touched her yet. He slowly takes off the gloves, packs up his stuff, and tells the girl to get the frick out. I was in a shop with a friend who was getting some dumb nautical stars tattooed around his elbow. He was standing up and getting the stencils lined up properly, and he locked his knees out. He hadn't eaten anything at all and promptly passed out, smashing his forehead on the counter on his way down. He bled everywhere and then badmouthed the shop like crazy because he was embarrassed, because apparently it was their fault that he can't stand without nearly dying. We're not friends any longer. He was definitely that artist's worst client. I worked in a shop for nearly 10 years and only had to throw out a couple of people. This guy came in with his girlfriend and 16-year-old daughter. He decides on what he wants and runs to the gas station before getting started. While the artist was doing his thing, the guy would have his girlfriend bring in his drink for him so he could take a couple of sips. He was also talking about pimping her out after he got his tattoo because he wanted to recoup his costs. This seemed a little awkward with the teen right there, but whatever. By the way, tattoo artists aren't therapists, and they usually aren't degenerate hedonists who revel in your debauchery either. We judge you just as much as any other stranger you might greet, but we don't say anything because you've given us money and we want our product to look good. So he's working on plans to pimp out his girlfriend and keeps sipping on his drink every few minutes. About halfway through, he starts saying the tattoo doesn't look right. The artist explains that it's because it isn't finished. This guy becomes more belligerent, and it hits me that he isn't just drinking soda, so I tell her she can't take him any more drinks. The artist is really angry now but just wants to finish the piece, and the guy is getting more angry each time I remind him he isn't getting more to drink while he's in our shop. Finally, with a half-finished tattoo, he decides to let us know he's gonna kick all of our butts. I think he went for his drink first because he walked into the lobby area and was looking around while I grabbed the whomping stick and helped the artist run him out and lock the door. The guy is outside yelling while the artist is on the phone with the cops. The girlfriend is saying she feels like we're kidnapping her, and the teen is obviously very embarrassed and occasionally mumbling that everyone is stupid. We explain to the girlfriend that she can leave, but the guy isn't coming back in without getting his wig split, so we let her out when the guy had wandered around a corner. I apologized to the teen on the way out for her unfortunate home life. This guy would occasionally call to let us know he was going to come back and fill us all with lead, but after a few weeks he stopped. And that's my story. What a colorful and fascinating clientele. I'm certain that the vast majority of people who get tattoos have never done anything illegal, by the way, so don't let this video color your perceptions. We did ask them to submit their worst customers, and they sure are supplying. Years ago, when I tattooed, the shop I worked at Friday night closed at 2 a.m. A man comes in with some friends around midnight and one woman. The guy is hanging all over this woman, and most are pretty tipsy, if not drunk, nothing new for a late Friday night. The guy wants a tattoo with the woman's name, Brandy, on his eggplant. We all say no. He's pretty adamant he's not leaving without getting that tattoo. The shop owner's son says he'll do it, double the cost, flat rate of $125. The guy agrees. He gets his tattoo, the woman loves it, and they leave. Next morning, get to the shop around 10 a.m. to open up and start cleaning the place. The guy from the last night is outside pacing in front of the shop. We walk up and he starts telling us how badly he needs us to cover that tattoo up. We tell him we can't, the location is too sensitive and it would need to heal before we do anything or it'll look like ground beef. He doesn't care. He needs it done ASAP. Why? The guy was getting married later that day and the girl from the night before, the one whose name was on his junk, was a stripper for his bachelor party. We use Vaseline to help the needle glide over the skin and to stop the ink from spreading over the stencil and surface of the skin. I keep the Vaseline on the back of my left hand while I tattoo with my right. Client reaches across, dabs her own goddamn motherfrickin' finger in my Vaseline, and then proceeds to moisturize her lips. I was too stunned to say anything other than to look up and slowly shake my head, while in the calmest of voices saying, "No, we don't do that." So I was doing some after-hours work for trade on this dude on his wife. I gave them half sleeves in return for a handful of pistols and rifles. They transferred the ownership ahead of time legally because Canada. so I've already got the items and can't back out. The first sit, the guy is a total whiner, like constantly moving and complaining. He wants a smoke break every 15 minutes, so it's a little unsurprising when he asks if he can take some Ativan, which is an anti-anxiety medication, for next time. Thinking that he meant like 1 to 2 pills, and having never heard of anyone going overboard on them before, I said sure. My mistake. The second sit, the wife drops him off and he takes like 5 or 6 pills, then another 5 or 6 pills right before we start. It's about this time that I recommend maybe he should go a little lighter. Nope, the guy just keeps popping them like candy until he's basically a zombie. We take a break and he hobbles and shuffles to the bathroom, comes back with his pants half off and spattered with wee-wee stains. Then he goes to take more pills and drops the canister, scattering them everywhere, and I get to watch while he picks them up in slow motion, slobber speaking, I'm sorry man, please don't hate me. I'm well past the point where I would have kicked any other client out, but I still technically owe him several hours and just wanted to get it over with. So for some reason, we keep going. Eventually he passes out, and after making sure he was breathing and okay, I just lean down on his arm to keep him still, and I plow on for another few hours while he drifts in and out of consciousness, asking me crap like if I want to go to a rub and tug with him. You ever been to a rub and tug? No man. It's a massage and they give you a happy ending after. Yeah, I know. You want to go right now? No thanks. But it's great, man. They give you a happy ending after. I'll pass. Eventually his wife comes by to pick him up. She's mortified and embarrassed, apologizing profusely. Apparently they aren't together anymore, and I still tattoo her semi-regularly. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. While getting my tattoo on my back, I had to take my shirt off. The tattoo artist wouldn't stop hitting on me. As the session was coming to an end, he said, "So I've got your number already. Would you mind if I call you?" I still had my shirt off. He was still tattooing my back, so if I said no, I was afraid he'd screw it up. So I said sure. I had to explain to my now husband why my tattoo artist wouldn't stop calling me. Another girl posted a negative review a month or so later saying the guy had hit on her while she was getting tattooed, she had said no, and he'd done a terrible job. I was getting the outlines of my sleeve finished when I noticed this average, normal-looking guy start twitching while being tattooed. The artist then became noticeably uncomfortable, and then about 5 minutes later, I crap you not, the guy went number 2 while getting his back piece. The reasoning was he was too scared to ask for the bathroom. He sat through the whole ordeal. I apprenticed at a tattoo shop for about 2 years in college. I ended up leaving, by which I mean running for the hills, when I finally wised up to the fact that the owner had virtually no intent of advancing me in any way. He just liked to hit on me and use me to get his takeaways, and was using the very crappy shop mainly as a front to sell his homemade substances. He once allowed me the privilege of tattooing the head of his Johnson. I should note I actually tattooed it twice. He was satisfied with the first go, and I ended up tattooing something on the shaft a little later. I'd pledged to myself when I decided I wanted to seriously pursue tattoo that I would never pass up any opportunity to practice or learn, so I'd agreed to all of this. It was about as awkward as you'd expect both times, especially because an eggplant needs to be hard for you to tattoo it. The tattoo came out good, but in the end it wasn't worth having to stare at that creep's sausage for 20 minutes while he made awkward comments and my co-workers watched. I'll be forever grateful for what I did learn in my last 6 months there, though. They hired on an older female artist who took a liking to me and ended up teaching me a lot and giving me more and more opportunities to tattoo. The bottom line was that the owner hated seeing me do actual work and tried really hard to discourage any progress that was being made. It was a real weird and bad dynamic from the beginning, as he was a piercer, not even a tattoo artist, and would basically just force me on whatever unwilling artist he was employing at the time. They never lasted long. Well, as much as we all would have loved to hear about how you wrote micro-soft on this former boss's member, I guess we can settle for being happy for you for getting out of there and learning so much from that other artist. I recently tattooed a cop who clearly snuck out of rehab to get his fix. The guy was absolutely wired on something and asked another artist's client if he looked like a smackhead. I didn't realize he was on substances when I started the tattoo. He signed a waiver saying he wasn't. I also tattooed a married man who tried to put his hand up my skirt during the tattoo. I have many more. I'm not an artist, but spending time with my ones, I've seen a steroid beast getting a back piece, needed a break to pace the room every 5 to 10 minutes. The girl doing his piece was becoming visibly more agitated every single time. Another time, a shop manager comes in laughing about something, shows an artist an email that had been sent to the shop. Would it be possible to book in again to make the lines in my tattoo a little thinner? Also, me and a guy that does mine having a smoke break halfway through. The shop being near a train station means we're in Junkie Central. A junkie proceeds to inquire if the shop does UV tattoos. No? Well, what if he brings his own ink? What if he offers to pay in booze and substances because he doesn't like handling money? The barter system is back, people. Many years ago, I'd been working and traveling around many countries across Asia, and since I was in Koh Pha Ngan, Thailand, at the time, I took a few days off to unwind. Over the next few days, I regularly saw this Danish girl at some of the beach bars. She had a large tattoo that looked fairly fresh, going down the right side of her back and torso. The tattoo was a phrase in Punjabi rather than the typical Asian scripts of Sanskrit, Chinese, or Japanese. You don't see a lot of those, so it really stuck out. I'm originally from this area in India. I finally mustered up enough courage to speak to her and asked her what the tattoo said. According to her, it was an old hippie Sanskrit proverb about bringing peace and love to the world. She had gotten this while traveling across India. She seemed so happy relaying her Indian travel stories, the mysticism, and why she finally got her very first tattoo. I felt so bad for her knowing what it really said. The characters were written so large I couldn't see how she could maybe convert it into something else. The impression I got from her was that she had left India earlier than anticipated, so I asked about this. Turns out the last few weeks she had been hassled by quite a lot of guys. Even the tattoo artist was gropey and seemed angry when she kept turning his advances down over multiple visits, simply wanting the tattoo to be finished. I finally told her what the tattoo was, and she was mortified. Not believing me at first, I Skyped a female cousin of mine in India who confirmed what I'd said. The poor girl couldn't stop crying. She always wore something over her bikini after that. The tattoo actually read, "This B word is a word for working girl. Use her and abuse her." I have no idea what happened to her afterwards as I had to get back to work, but I'm presuming she had to somehow get the tattoo removed, which going by the size would have been very expensive and painful. Poor girl. I used to have this client. Just thinking about her makes me angry. So we had a minimum price policy at the shop I was at back then. Anything that takes 45 minutes or less is $100. She'd come in every single week and try to fit as many Christian-related things as she could into that time frame, to the point where she just looked like she was covered in a bunch of fridge magnets. Now, I don't make very much off that $100 price tag. $50 goes to the shop, and close to $15 goes towards my material for doing the tattoo. Also, this woman was just really annoying. She imagined someday we were going to be able to tie in all these completely random images into some cohesive piece, despite the fact that she refused to do anything longer than the minimum 45-minute session. She'd constantly moan in disturbing half-pain or kind of pleasurable ways when I tattooed her. She was constantly asking me about my faith, and I'd try to dodge that since I'm an atheist. She'd also try to make unrelated symbols into Christian ones somehow. A really good example of this is when she came in for an anchor tattoo. I asked her how she wanted it colored. She wanted the metal hooks on the bottom to be blue and the cross to be orange. I asked her what she meant by the cross, and she pointed to the eye, stock, and shank of the anchor, insisting that it was a cross. I politely explained to her that those have nothing to do with Christianity and are simply engineering design functions. She insisted that the anchor is a Christian symbol because Christians were the first sailors. Oh my god. I was already at the point where I'd been getting sick of this lady. She'd been coming in for months and generally being more trouble than she was worth every time. I did tattoos for her anyways because of money up till then. Luckily for me, it was at a time I started getting busier with good projects and clients that didn't want to nitpick every tiny detail of their already really simple tattoos. This lady would call and I wouldn't have time because she refused to do anything but walk-ins. Eventually, she started coming in to try and speak to me when I was busy with other clients, asking me why I couldn't just get her in between big 3 and 5 hour appointments. As if I don't need a break to eat lunch or have a cigarette. I politely explained this to her and that people who book ahead get preference since they put money down. Not only that, but myself and almost anyone in the industry prefers to do bigger projects rather than trying to cram as many tiny things in as possible into a 45-minute time period. Sure, we make $100 in 45 minutes, but it's $150 per hour when people are committing to come in for 3 to 5 hours, sometimes more, and that's a lot better for me. Eventually, I went on a trip to Thailand with my girlfriend for 4 months. She eventually started going to another artist in the shop who was better able to fit her in. It also helped that he was born deaf, so he didn't have to listen to her Christian rambling or the weird noises she'd make when getting tattooed. I've since moved shops and have a much better deal here and a much better commission as well. She came up in conversation once when I first started at this shop. Turns out she'd pulled the same sort of thing here years before and they stopped answering the phone when her name came up on call display, and everyone was always too busy when she had come in. I kind of feel bad for her. She always had the appearance of some sort of illness, and she quite possibly could have had a mental illness too. The really sad thing is that for the amount of money she spent in a year, she could have had most of her body done in something big and beautiful and still religious in meaning. Instead, she's got a bunch of crappy, albeit well-done, small tattoos all over her. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out Easy Mode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.